Chapter 7 is all about probability. Chapter 6 leads us quite well into probability. In section 7.1, part 1, we're going to talk about experiments, sample spaces, and events. This is a lot of vocabulary, just getting used to the vocabulary used in probability. So let's start off with some terms, some vocabulary terms. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is an experiment. So for us, an experiment is simply an activity with an observable outcome or results. Observable results. So some examples, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, might be tossing a single coin. So, tossing a coin and observing heads or tails. Now I'm going to come back to this example in just a minute, so I'm leaving just a little bit of room here. Let's see, another one would be testing a cell phone, and what we're going to observe is whether or not it's defective. So we'll say, and observing it's defective. Does it work or not? And then the last possibility, and again, this is not all of them, this is just a short supply to give you an idea what we mean by an experiment, is let's look at a two-child family. And maybe count the number of boys. So we'll say, and observing number of boys. We can also observe the number of girls, but we'll observe the number of boys. So a sample point is any outcome within an experiment. Again, that's called a sample point in your textbook. We can also have the sample space. So the sample space is defined to be the set of all sample points in an experiment. So to help us get an idea of what the sample space is, it's very similar to the universe in chapter 6. It's the large set under consideration within a problem. So in this case, it's all the possible outcomes in an experiment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back down to the examples that we listed for the experiment and actually list the sample space. So I'm going to call it S for sample space. So the sample space when you toss a coin would either be a head or a tail. And that's it. When you're tossing one coin, you can either get a head or a tail. Now the head is considered to be a sample point. The tail is a sample point. Together, they make up the sample space. So the sample space for observing whether or not that cell phone is defective or not, well, we could use a D for defective and an N for not defective. So D for defective, N for not defective. And that's the only possible outcomes that we could have. And finally, and I ran out of room, the sample space for a two-child family observing the number of boys. Well, my two-child family could have no boys, or one boy, or two boys. So the sample space in this case is a set of numbers, 0, 1, 2, whereas over here was words or letters. And that's what a sample space is made of. Now, an event, our next word, the event is a subset of the sample space. And we'll do an example of this in just a bit, but it goes back to the vocabulary that we used in chapter 6. A subset of a set is anything that's contained within that set. The next three words we should be familiar with because we did talk about them already. So we have the idea of an impossible event. That's an event that cannot occur. That's our empty set. So the empty set is simply an event. Well, let's just say an impossible event. So an example would be tossing a die, a single die, right, and getting a 7. Well, you can't. There's only 6 sides on it. So the event would be an empty set because you cannot get a 7 on a single roll of die. The other terms we have are union. We know that union means everything in both sets. So if you remember right, the notation for a union looked like a U, and the key word was or. We have intersection. The intersection was the overlap or the elements in common. So the elements in common to both sets. Common to both sets. The overlap. The symbol was an intersection. It looks like the upside down U on N. And the key word was and. We also saw the use of the word complement. And the complement of a set was everything outside of the set, but still inside the sample space. So we'll say all elements in S outside the event. And if you remember right, our notation was that little c. So E complement the event, the complement of event, little c for complement. Okay, and the last vocabulary term we need is new to us. Mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive. Okay, well, that simply tells me that if 2 events are mutually exclusive, they're disjoint. So events are mutually exclusive. They are disjoint. The intersection is empty. It really means that the 2 events cannot occur at the same time. So an example would be tossing a coin. I'm either going to get a head or a tail. They can't both occur. I can't get a head tail on the same toss. So those are mutually exclusive events. Okay, that's it for vocabulary. We'll start doing some samples in the next part.